And now, the survival show that once survived smashing its finger in a car door. In this episode, we do a little time travel to learn lessons from the past. I'll share 5 lessons I've learned from 15 years in preparedness. Howdy and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 248. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole. Safe and sound. This might best be episode 250, actually. But it just dawned on me what episode this even was. Most of the time I just crank these out and I'm not really paying attention to what episode it is. It's crazy to think the show is this old and that there are this many episodes. It blows my mind every time. It seems like yesterday, Jonathan and I were still in the original studio setting up and thinking about what is in the rabbit hole. But I was just here sitting and had a thought. This is going to be a monologue episode. Then I started banging out a list of ideas and came upon what today's was going to be about. It made me think, if I could go back in time and share lessons with myself, what would they be? And I think this will be good this is especially good for new preppers, but it may even be good for some preppers who are a little bit further along and maybe there's some things that they want to backtrack on. As a side note, the title of this episode is 5 Lessons from 15 Years. I can't say when I really got serious about prep. The show started in 2010, but I think this really all started in 2003. It could have started back in the late 90s. By started, I mean where this started to be something I seriously thought about and engaged with on a daily basis. Like every day, this became something that I devoted time and thought to. Now, here's the thing. Comment on this episode and let me know if you'd like a part 2. I actually came up with 15 in total, but today we're just going to do 5. Again, comment to let me know if you like this episode and you want the other 10 things that I came up with. Anyway, let's dive in. Number 1, you can't become a Swiss Army knife. Number 2, answers need context and nuance. Number 3, planning and preparing for Titawaki is a recipe for disaster and burnout. Number 4, you can't force your partner into prep, no matter how much you want to. Everything needs an immediate return on investment to start. Now let's deep dive on lesson number 1. You can't reasonably become a human Swiss Army knife. You're just going to wear yourself out trying. The author of Life After Terrorism and Life After Nuclear War, Bruce Clayton, once wrote this to me in an email. Clayton struck me as a lot like most listeners and myself from the limited interaction I had with him. He's intensely curious, observant, and drawn to solving problems. Preparedness and survival offers a cornucopia of problems to solve. How do I deal with food production? How do I deal with water procurement? How do I deal with shelter? How do I deal with electricity? How do I deal with a violent encounter? How do I deal with communications? We can go on and on and on, right? There's so many things. All of them present 2 perceived deficits: a lack of skills and a lack of gear and or supplies. The more problems you see, the more skills you learn, the more you think you need to learn. And if you're like me, you want to be really good at them. All of them, right? And you want to learn all of them right now. Then we get frustrated when life gets in the way. You know, that thing you're mostly trying to protect from disaster. We'll come back to that at the very end. I've paired myself back to 2 things a year. Right now, it's Kalashnikovs and reloading. Next year, it'll be fruit trees and other things to make the property more productive. There's nothing inherently wrong with becoming a human Swiss Army knife, but it does require patience and moderation. You can't come at things like the world is ending tomorrow. You're just going to wear yourself out. This also brings up 2 things. The first is, number 2, all answers need context and nuance. People often say, go with rabbits as a survival meat crop. They breed like rabbits after all. In year 3 of the I2H farm project that Jason and I were working on, we had more rabbits than we wanted to eat. On one of the harvesting days, Jason and I spent from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. culling and breaking down rabbits. And by breaking down, I mean butchering. Now, he and I can spend more time flapping our lips and goofing off in one day than most people could in an entire week. It's an ongoing joke between he and I. Where does the time go? We can sit and 5 hours can pass and we thought it was 15 minutes. We can waste that much time. But those last few harvesting days were nonstop. At that stage, we had 18 does and 6 bucks. I'll let you do the math on your own on what that equates to when you actually figure out what you're doing and are doing it right. A lot of frickin' rabbits. We had so much rabbit meat, we were sick of rabbit. I'm still sick of rabbit years later, which is another hidden lesson. But, in general, if you're trying to prepare for, whatever, the zombies to march, this sounds great. Lots of rabbits, meat aplenty. Sure, with the right breed, the right time of year and temperatures, especially if you live where we are, where you're like a mile from the sun and it's blazing hot in the summers, the right bucks and does, the right breed, the right feed, and even additives to that feed, no vermin to wipe out your stock, which did happen to us. Lots and lots of fresh water that's easy to get to your rabbits, which we never had. Knowing to put the buck back in with the doe for a second round of fun within 6 hours because she's got 2 sides to her reproductive system and she may have peed and cleaned out the pipes. There's also things like only buy 5.56 or 308 ammo because those are the most common rounds and they'll be around after shit hits the fan. Yes and no, with a sprinkling of there's a bunch of caveats. You also hear only buy DC and AA flashlights and batteries because those are the most common batteries you'll find after shit hit the fan. Also, yes and no with a dash of caveats, including has that actually changed, which there are changes in the industry that there's a lot of batteries that used to be weird batteries that are easy to find now and are actually very plentiful. The point here is don't simply take stock answers and think that's it and run with it. You need to understand the context and all the nuances that come along with it. But don't lose your head up your own butt about it, right? Which brings us to the second thing and number 3. Planning and preparing for the end of the world as we know it is a recipe for disaster and burnout. Most preppers, survivalists, or whatever you want to label yourself as, have a pet disaster. I say zombies are mine because I've given up on focusing on one thing. What happens is this. The person gets freaked out about the possibility of insert your disaster here. They go bananas buying stuff. They go bananas talking and worrying about Titowaki. They drive their friends and family bananas talking about it. Then time marches on. The thing doesn't happen, and they eventually burn out. They eventually sell their pile of prepper crap on eBay at a loss. They leave their mutual aid group after they start missing a lot of meetings because, well, kids, work, or, whatever. They go back to sleep, mostly unprepared for the likely things to happen. What was the point here? Begin by preparing for the likely. Slowly work your way down the line of crazy till you find the level of crazy you're comfortable with. You'll also have an easier time bringing a loved one along on the journey. We'll be back after this quick break. Listener, do you get at least $3 a month worth of value out of I2H? You should see what we do for the Roving Horde Armada members. Check it out today by visiting i2h.net. Members get access to episodes a day early, access to monthly virtual and in-person meetups in some areas, an invitation to the secret I2H Armada Facebook group so you can chat about survival all day long with like-minded people. Access to every episode ever produced by I2H. That's right, all the way back to the beginning, including one that was never aired. And those are just a few things you get with your membership when you sign up and become part of the I2H Roving Horde by going to i2h.net. it2rh.net. Again, that's it2rh.net. You'll also have an easier time bringing a loved one along on the journey. This brings up number 4. You can't force your husband, wife, life partner, whatever, into prep. In the top 3 questions I hear is this: how do I get my wife on board with prep? You personally start off slow and at a basic level. We discussed this in number 3 just a moment ago, right? This helps you not look like a crazy person in the eyes of your spouse, aside from keeping you away from burnout. Keep in mind that you're all keyed up and consuming a mountain of information on potential disasters. You're feeding the survivalist beast. Guess what? They're not. And so going from 0 to 900 miles an hour out of the blue is hard for them. And in their eyes, you may need to be medicated. I've spent a lot of time looking back on how I got my wife into prep as a way of trying to answer this for people. One was she was actually pretty young and impressionable when we first started dating. She was 22. 2, it was just who I was and how I ran my life. So she kind of stepped into it. 3, I wasn't full tilt bore since I was already taking a slow and steady approach to things. She also happened to be somebody predisposed, as she was a first-generation American whose family fled communism with the clothes on their back. So selection process also had a lot to do with that success there. A little tip for you single folks. So it was easy for her to step into this. But the real trick is that it was not a sudden change. But there were times where I got pushback, and sometimes you do just have to man or woman up and say, this is what we're doing because we need a little insurance. You don't have to help me, but I am making this change to keep our family safe and sound. But use this very sparingly. And if the person's like my wife, some people just like to go head to head when you tell them this is how it's going to be. Then there's the slightly less effective, logical way of selling things, and an important point. Almost everything needs an ROI in the immediate future, especially in the beginning. This is point number 5. Buying a bug out location? No, you're not. You're buying a vacation property which can serve as a bug out location. Your return on investment is the first weekend or week you spend decompressing there. And your other immediate return on investment is going to be the fun you have thinking through all the cool stuff you're going to be doing to that property over the next 5 years to make it a great place to vacation and possibly bug out too. The illustration here is that sometimes you just need to change the why to find a personal ROI. ROI is return on investment for those not stuck in management meetings all day. Another thing this will do is keep you from doing things like buying 10 AR lowers because apocalypse, or buying a pallet of Mountain House food for your first month into preparedness because apocalypse. You'll ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve? Most of the time, it's just a sense of safety and security. That can mean you just need one lower or one bucket of freeze-dried food. And later down the road, you can do more. Funny story. I once decided toilet paper was a really big deal when the world went to shit. So I ended up buying a 4-year supply. Or at least I recently realized it was a 4-year supply. My math was a little off and I kind of let the Amazon subscribe thing just run for a while. This actually caused more stress because storing a 4-year supply of toilet paper is a pain in the ass. Yes, there's lots of puns in this section. And it tied up more funds than was reasonable at that stage of my journey. All I needed at that point was to feel better about whatever was on my mind, and that would have been a 3 to 6 month supply. Let's be honest, 99% of the time we do stuff so we can say, if shit hits the fan, I got that toilet paper thing covered for 99.999% of the likely events. That's all we really need. Buying one gun and immediately learning to service it and run it has an immediate ROI of filling the hole, being fun, and putting your mind at ease. Buying a whole battery all at once has a negative immediate return by causing you more stress. The point here is this: fill all the prepper gaps up to 3 weeks, then 3 months, and so on. Start at basic and work your way towards crazy, and then find the level of crazy that you think makes the most sense. It will change dramatically over time, I guarantee you. As I said earlier, comment on this episode and let me know if you'd like a part 2. I came up with 15 in total, so there's 10 more. Again, comment and let me know if you'd like the other 10. Show notes from this episode and other resources can be found by going to intherabbithole.com/E248. Support the show and get ITRH Roving Horde Armada members-only benefits. Go to itrh.net to become part of the Roving Horde Armada. Twice a month, members get on private virtual hangs. These are a chance to hang out with me and other like-minded everyday preppers to discuss whatever is on your mind. You know, those things you can't discuss with everyone else or that you are driving everyone else nuts with. You also get access to every episode ITRH has ever made, the on-demand bug-out bag class, special prepper spreadsheets, and an invitation to the secret ITRH Armada Facebook group. That's just to name a few things you get when you go to itrh.net and become part of the Roving Horde Armada. Again, that's itrh.net to find out about exclusive members-only benefits. With that, we wrap up episode number 248 from the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.